Has a book ever made you stop and think about your family in a whole new way? Well, today I'm gonna be talking about Please Look After Mother, written by Shin Kyung-sook, and this novel really resonated with people all over the world. And on the surface, it is just a story about missing mother, but beyond that, it is actually extraordinary exploration of family dynamics, societal expectations, and also very often silence struggles with mental health that are being experienced specifically by women within the South Korean culture. This book, despite being very absorbing, made me actually stop and ask myself a question: how well do I really know people that I love? So let's talk about it. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Please Look After Mother starts with the disappearance of a mother, and her name is Park So-nyo. And also, I'm really sorry about mispronunciation, but I really tried my best to research to see how to pronounce it, and yeah, I'm still not entirely sure if I'm saying it right. And then each chapter in this book is dedicated to separate narratives told from the perspective of her children, her husband, and also one chapter is dedicated to the mother herself, where she talks about herself, her emotions, her experiences. And what follows is that her children and husband, they're grappling with memories and regrets, because with them, once they try to retrace her life, they just realize how little they knew her. And here, Park So-nyo is really a representation of so many other moms that maybe they are always last in line, that they are forgotten, that they're covering up their pains, whether they are physical or emotional, with cooking, cleaning, always being busy, and maybe also with that very familiar phrase of I'm okay, I'm fine. And also why I find this book really interesting, it is because it doesn't really address mental health issues directly, but it is always somewhere there in between the lines. So for instance, how the mother, she always covers up the back pain, the headaches, how she's really not admitting to suffering with grief, and how she's denying the loneliness even though she lives in a full house. And this is actually something that many of us can't relate with, that very often we also miss certain signs that someone that we love is actually struggling with something. With the help of this book and by having this narrative spoken by different people, we can piece together a character that represents a seemingly an ordinary woman, an ordinary mother. But then we start realizing that there are actually layers of sacrifice, of burnout, and also of mental health issues that she has been dealing on her own for many years. And one of the most striking aspects of this book, it is how subtly it actually portrays the immense pressure that is being put by society on South Korean mother. So-nyo in this book actually embodies the selflessness, always prioritizing needs of other people above her own one. But then what happens is, as a result of that, this leads to exhaustion, isolation, and neglect of her own physical and also emotional needs. So now, let's diagnose the text, not So-nyo herself, but what her character represents. We know that So-nyo, she swallows the pain. She never complains about her headaches. She actually hides it from her family members. She also hides the back pain. She eats spoiled food, but she never complains. And this is perhaps linked to the good mother that is being recognized in South Korea as the mother who doesn't complain. In psychology, we would call it chronic self-silencing. And this is impacting generations of women, not only in South Korea. We have research that tells us that in South Korea, woman's body is seen as a tool to care for other people. And when a woman she's experiencing, for instance, pain, this can be seen as a distraction from this duty, and that includes also emotional pain. So in a situation when Park So-nyo, she's really making any effort to deny her pains. So even when she's experiencing headache, she would say, oh, it's only tiredness. This can be seen as her somatizing her distress, and obviously that then leads to the depression. And specifically within the South Korean culture, talking about mental health struggles is still seen as a taboo. Another really important issue that has been addressed in this book, it is the issue of identity. So we know from the book that So-nyo perhaps has only two identities, of a mother and also wife. And we know from research as well that mothers in South Korea actually are 3 times less likely to seek therapy comparing with fathers. And this could be to do with the fact that the idea of caring for yourself can be often linked to the feeling of being selfish. And what is problematic about having very few identities, that for instance in case of So-nyo, when her children they grew up, they left, and then in a way, once they left, she also lost that part of her identity. So she was almost like going through grieving. She was dealing with loss, but again, she was unable to really address these emotional issues, and therefore perhaps she started somatizing them and experience all these physical symptoms in her body. Something really important that this book is trying to tell us is that being quiet and being silent isn't a strength. Although in some cultures it is actually portrayed like that, but being silent, it is a slow suffocation. There's another layer to this character, and it's to do with grief. And when we read this book, we kind of realize that her sorrow is everywhere, but at the same time it's nowhere. So the way she's touching her belly when no one is looking, it could be her body reminding her of when she lost her child, when she's completely denying her headaches and she just calls them a tiredness, for instance. So this isn't just a sacrifice, right? This is a disenfranchised grief that the person deals with without almost like having permission. It is a grief where it is not really socially acceptable to grieve over something or someone. In South Korean society, women are expected to endure, to be patient with the emotional or physical pains. So if a woman, for instance, will complain about losing a child, she might be told that you have another one. If she will complain about her husband neglecting her needs, she might be told, be patient. And then obviously her pains, they go underground, right? So they try to push them away. And studies shows that women in South Korea from the generation of Park So-nyo, they are actually tend to somatize their griefs and turning the grief into insomnia, back pain, headaches, or that familiar phrase, I'm okay, I'm fine. So if you know someone who doesn't have any other identity beyond being a caregiver, who's dismissing all the pains and maybe says that no, there's no issue, I'm only tired, who's also pushing away any help, it might be that actually they are struggling beneath all of these. So now let's think about the cultural context a bit more. In South Korea, there's often emphasis on filial piety, which in Korean language is hyo. And this is care and respect for parents. So while this is a very beautiful value, sometimes what might happen that this actually creates this dynamic where the emotional needs are being overlooked, specifically in older generations and also in females, at the expense of the physical needs. Talking about mental health issues in South Korea can be stigmatized. And specifically for people from older generations can be even more harder to seek therapy and to talk about their mental emotional struggles. We know that in South Korea only 1 in 10 people actually seeks help for depression. Mental health stigmas in South Korea are still strong. Therefore, talking about burnout and loneliness, grief, can feel to women as if they were letting down their families. So So-nyo's character is a representation of many generations of women who have been dealing silently with their mental health issues because of certain societal norms that has been prescribed to them. Shin, the author of the book, in really amazing way, using this shifting perspective, and I'm not sure, maybe this is some sort of like writing method, but it works really well, because in this way she's really showing how each member of the family, so the father and the kids, are able to acknowledge the mom's action and also her sacrifices, but very often they fail at recognizing her inner world that she inhibited. This book highlights amazingly how invisible mental health issues can be, and in order for us to be there for other people, and in order, to help them, to support them, we need to be really well attuned to not only what they directly speaking to us, but also to all these really subtle signs that they might be giving us. This novel also touches on themes of guilt and regret. So it shows what the children and the husband are experiencing after So-nyo disappeared. So they started to question if they truly saw their mother, if they acknowledge her as individual beyond her role as a mother. And I know some people, they will say that this book guilt trip us, but I don't agree with that. I think it actually makes us reflect about our relationships with our loved ones, makes us think whether we are really present with the other person, whether we are empathically attuned with them, and this is actually a really good thing. So now let's think why all this happens. So as we said before, in South Korean culture there's emphasis on showing respect and care to older people in the family, which is called hyo. But that doesn't actually negate the idea that the person still can be unseen. And this is actually what happens in the context of good mother myth. So research actually calls this a Korean supermom syndrome, where the sacrifice is equal with love and suffering is equal with strength. And then we have Han, the deep collective sorrow that we already talked about, where So-nyo's grief isn't just hers, it is actually a generational pain passed down by mothers who have no language to explain what they're experiencing emotionally. And yes, we have mind-blowing figures of 72% Korean mothers reporting suppressing their emotional needs. But not everything is dark and gloomy. There's a hope, and this book actually, it is a part of this conversation. And women from younger generations in South Korea, they are actually trying to challenge those stereotypes about mental health, and they're seeking more help within mental health, and applications such as Calf Mind are actually booming. That shows that people are actually trying to seek help in context of the mental health. Although this book, Please Look After Mother, it is just a novel fiction, but it actually represents issues of many people around the world, not only in South Korea. The pressure of societal expectations, the burden that people might be feeling because they're unable to speak about their emotions, the stigma that is surrounding mental health are universal challenges, right? And this book actually serves as a powerful reminder to practice, for instance, a deeper empathy, to look beyond the surface, what maybe the person is telling us, and try to understand the inner lives of those people that we really love around us. This book also reminds us to challenge stigma around mental health, and maybe to create spaces where we can feel more comfortable to talk about what we feel, where we can actually normalize mental health issues. This book also reminds us to recognize the subtle signs that someone might be expressing. So someone might not be directly telling us that they're dealing with depression or anxiety or grief, but still through certain unspoken cues, through their non-verbal expressions, we might be recognized that this person actually needs a help. This book also reminds us about the value of caregivers and reminds us to acknowledge and support the emotional well-being of those who often prioritize needs of other people, like mothers or primary caregivers. So now, as a psychologist, there's a few things that I think we could take away from this book. So for instance, the good enough mother. Although children of So-nyo's, they're actually idolizing her sacrifice. In psychology, we would say that that sort of perfectionism in context of parenting, it isn't really a healthy parenting. And what's actually better than the perfect parenting, it is the Winnicott's good enough mother theory that talks about healthy parenting, including self-care. And then we have ambiguous loss. So when So-nyo disappears, her family deals with very complicated grief because they don't know whether she's dead, whether she's gonna come back, when she's gonna come back, where she is, what she's doing. And this kind of mirrors what families in South Korea they were going through because of the war and migration. So this is really a representation of generational trauma that people are still dealing with because of stigma with mental health issues. And if you're interested in learning more about generational trauma, then I will encourage you to go and watch this video where I review a Netflix series Beef, where I address issues of generational trauma within the East Asian minorities. What else we can find in this book is that in a daughter's chapter we can see that there's already some shift happening. So the daughter is already challenging and questioning her mom's silence in context of her physical and also emotional needs. So yes, have you read Please Look After Mother? If yes, please let me know your thoughts in the comment section. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, then please like it, subscribe, and I'm gonna see you in the next one then. Thank you. Bye bye.